Once upon a time, there was a little girl. Once her rich father married an evil stepmother. She settled in the house with her 2 daughters. Their faces were beautiful and white, but their hearts were evil and cruel. And then came a difficult time for the poor girl. From morning until late in the evening, they forced her to do dirty work, carry water, heat the stove, cook food, wash dishes, and do laundry. And besides, the half-sisters did their best to upset her as much as possible. They mocked her, poured peas and wheat into the ashes, and she had to sit and pick them out. In the evening, when she was tired of work, she had to go to bed not in bed, but on the floor, next to the stove. And because she was always in ash, dust, and dirty, the sisters called her Cinderella. But then it happened one day that the king started a feast, which was supposed to last for 3 whole days, and called all the beautiful girls of the country to the holiday so that his son could choose a bride for himself. When the 2 named sisters learned that they, too, could come to the feast, they instantly began to dress up and preen. Cinderella also wanted to go dancing, but her stepmother did not let her go, because she had no dress or shoes, and she was dirty. And then the evil stepmother poured a bowl of wheat into the ashes and said that if Cinderella collected it in 2 hours, then she could go with her sisters. Cinderella went out into the garden and cried. And then 2 white doves flew in, followed by a whole flock of different birds. They swooped down on the ash and began to peck, and so they chose all the grains in a bowl. In less than an hour, they finished their work, and everyone flew back. Cinderella brought a bowl to her stepmother, began to rejoice, thinking that she could go to the feast. But her stepmother would not let her in any way. She turned her back on Cinderella and hurried with her 2 daughters to the ball. When there was no one left at home, Cinderella sat down on the floor and cried with grief. And then 2 white doves flew in, followed by a whole flock of different birds, and they threw off their dress and shoes shiny and all in gold. She quickly put on this dress and came to the bride. They saw her stepsisters and stepmother and thought that it must be some strange princess, she was so beautiful in her golden dress. It never occurred to them that it was Cinderella. The prince came out to meet her, took her hand, and they began to dance. And he liked Cinderella so much that he did not want to dance with any other girl. She danced until the evening and wanted to return home, but the prince asked her to see her off. He wanted to know whose beautiful girl this is, and where she lives. But Cinderella ran away from him and climbed onto the dovecot. The prince ordered to destroy the dovecot, but there was no one in it. And nowhere near could he find his beautiful stranger. No one could have guessed that Cinderella was rescued by pigeons that took her home. The prince was upset and went to the palace with his head down. And suddenly he saw a shoe, lifted it up. It was so small and elegant and all of pure gold. The prince guessed that when Cinderella ran away from him, the shoe from her left foot remained on one of the steps. The prince was delighted and ordered to find the mistress of this shoe, and to whom it suits he will marry that one. The parents returned from the ball. They saw that Cinderella was asleep in her shirt on ash, and a dim light was on by the stove. Both sisters went to their rooms, hoping that tomorrow they would be lucky enough to put on the golden slipper. The next day, the prince came to their house, and said that everyone who wants to try on the shoe of his future wife should come out. 2 sisters came out, and the stepmother locked Cinderella in the house and did not let her out. The older sister tried it on a small shoe. The younger sister tried it on the shoe as great. The prince was about to leave, but Cinderella climbed out of the window and ran out to him. And she put on a shoe, and it just fit her. The prince looked into her eyes and recognized in her the very beautiful girl with whom he danced. He took Cinderella, put her on a horse and rode off to play a wedding with her. And he ordered the sisters and stepmother to be locked in their house and never let them out of there. This is how they were punished for their malice and deceit.
In one small town there lived a toy maker, Geppetto.
Hello!
He made a living selling homemade wooden toys. He liked his work. The only thing the old master regretted was that he had no children. One day, while walking in the woods, Geppetto saw an excellent log for new toys. He took the log with him and brought it to the workshop. Immediately, without delay, the old man began to cut a toy out of him. But suddenly he heard a thin voice from the log. Geppetto thought what he imagined. He continued to carve the toy, and after a while he heard the voice again. Geppetto decided that he was simply getting too old and began to hear strange voices.
Oh no!
The old man continued to work. First, he made the doll's head. Then arms and legs appeared. Geppetto finished the doll and sat her down in a chair. And he decided to clean up after himself. And at that moment he heard the voice again. Geppetto froze and looked around. But there was no one in the room except a wooden doll. The old man continued his work. And suddenly, the doll jumped up from the chair. Geppetto was speechless. When he realized that his doll came to life, he decided to give her a name. And he named him Pinocchio. Geppetto and Pinocchio lived merrily together. It's time to send your son to school. Geppetto lived poorly and had no money for school supplies for Pinocchio. He decided to sell his jacket and gave the money to the boy. Pinocchio took the money and happily hurried to school. Suddenly, he saw a crowd of people. To find out what was happening, the boy squeezed forward and saw in front of him a huge colored tent. It was a circus. The clown stood in front of the entrance and barked visitors. Pinocchio became very interested in what was inside. But the clown would not let him in because the boy did not have a ticket. Pinocchio took money out of his pocket and gave it to the clown. Going inside the tent, the boy saw how funny dolls were playing a performance on the stage. At the same time, the owner of the circus noticed Pinocchio. He was very happy to see a living doll and decided to take Pinocchio into his performance. As soon as the show was over, the owner of the circus caught the boy and put him in a cage. Pinocchio was very upset that he did not obey his father and did not go to school. He burst into tears. And suddenly, a fairy appeared in front of him. She saw that Pinocchio greatly regretted his deed and decided to save him. The fairy cast a spell, and Pinocchio was on the street with money in his hands. He headed to school again. On the way, Pinocchio met a blind cat and a cunning fox. When they found out that the boy had money, the cat and the fox decided to take it. They said that this money is not enough for school supplies and it needs to be increased. And for this they need to plant money in a magic field. A money tree should grow from the earth, from which a generous monetary harvest could be reaped. The naive Pinocchio believed the scammers and gave his money. When the boy was left alone and without money, the fairy appeared in front of him again. Pinocchio lied to the fairy and said he had already bought school supplies. As soon as he said this, his nose began to grow. The more Pinocchio lied, the longer his nose became. He was very scared and told the fairy the whole truth. At the same instant, the boy's nose shrank to normal size. The fairy warned that every time Pinocchio cheated, his nose would enlarge. After these words, the boy again found himself on his way to school with money in his hands. Suddenly, the owner of the circus blocked the road to Pinocchio. He was terribly angry that the boy was able to escape and wanted to put him back in the cage. But Pinocchio was not easy to catch. Without hesitation, he jumped into the water. Pinocchio was made of wood, so he didn't drown. And the current carried the boy forward. When he was already swimming to the shore, a giant fish swallowed him. At the same time, desperate to look for his son on land, old man Geppetto decided to start searching on the water. He borrowed a small boat from a fisherman friend and swam to look. Suddenly a violent storm began. The boat could not cope with the waves and crashed. The old man could not swim and therefore began to drown. And then, a huge fish that swallowed Pinocchio swallowed Geppetto. When he got inside, he immediately saw his son. Seeing his father, Pinocchio was very happy. He was very sorry that he had not obeyed and promised from that moment to always do as his father told him. Seeing that Pinocchio was truly sorry, the fairy decided to save them. She freed the boy and the old man from the belly of the fish and carried them to the shore. Pinocchio became a very intelligent and obedient boy. He went to school every day, and after studying he helped his father in the workshop.